State Fire Marshal's Office. We're really glad to have you joining us tonight for this event that is focused on wildfire preparedness. And just again, for those of you who've joined us, I just want to make sure and welcome you again to this Facebook Live and YouTube Live Facebook Live, YouTube Live meeting with Congresswoman Hoyle and Chief Travis Medema with the Oregon State Fire Marshal's Office. My name's Carmen, and I'm going to be the host for this evening's meeting. And a few things before I invite the Congresswoman to give some opening remarks. If you'd like to sign up for the Congresswoman's e-newsletter, you can do so anytime at our website. You can Google Congresswoman Hoyle or Val Hoyle, and it'll take you to hoyle.house.gov, and you can sign up there. Additionally, there'll be wildfire safety resources, and the presentation that Chief Medema is giving tonight will also be on our website. You should also notice that in the top corner of our screen, there is a QR code. If you want to use that tonight, it will take you to all the same resources. I'll repeat that information in case you missed it, and for other people who will be joining us later in the call. This is an experiment for us. We don't do these that often. So I want to let folks know that unlike a Town Hall, we'll be tracking questions that you put in the queue, and I'll be reading those out tonight. And we hope to get to as many questions as we possibly can this evening. And at the end, we hope that this event will be informative and give you and your family information you need to best prepare for this year's wildfire season. With that, Congresswoman Hoyle, the floor is yours.
So thank you everyone for being here. We had a telephone town hall last week, and we had so many people participating, and we had people call afterwards saying, I wasn't able to get on. Can we get this information in another way? And the Oregon State Fire Marshal had a PowerPoint that we weren't able to show on a telephone town hall. So today we are doing another town hall, but on Facebook Live with Travis Medema from the Oregon State Fire Marshal to talk about what we can do to get ready for fire season. So it is going to be a bad fire season. We are at record level drought. We are at less than 5% snowpack. The Mackenzie River was in April at the lowest recorded level in recorded history. So things are dry, things are bad, but there are things that we can do. Number one, between 75 and 85% of fires are caused by humans. So we need to take precautions. If we remember what happened up at Willamette Falls, it was some kids with fireworks and it burned so much of our forest. The bottom line is we have to think about one spark, one campfire that isn't put out, one firework can actually start a massive fire that will lead to, terrible outcomes. So we have to be cognizant of our role. Number one. Number two, for those of us who live in areas that are, whether it is in, in rural areas or in the urban wildland interface, where it's between urban and rural areas, we have to be prepared. I know that this week when I was home, I prepared my to-go bag, right? We keep it in our gun safe because that is fireproof. So we're ready. So when there is, when someone says you have to go, we're ready to go. We want to talk to you about how to get ready, how to make sure you have defensible space around your home, how to make sure that you are not contributing to the problem, and also to make sure everyone is aware of what we are doing at the state level, at the federal level, at the local level, to coordinate wildland firefighting. But the best way to fight fires is to prevent them from happening in the first place. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Travis Medema from the Oregon State Fire Marshal's Office. And thank you so much for being with us here tonight.
Thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you for those powerful words. You're 100% right on. And we put together a quick PowerPoint, and if we can pull that up, maybe we'll walk through that. And so tonight's focus is we'll step into fire season 2026. We'll talk through kind of the conditions where we're currently at, the trends as we get later into the fire season, and then really close with some messages and some thoughts for Oregonians that they can do in and around their homes and in and around their communities. And so let's go to the next slide. So to kind of step into fire season 2026, we have to look at where we've been. As we went into the winter months, we were in a La Nina, which generally means cooler, wetter conditions. You can see from those two charts, the one on the left and the one on the right, is one is temperature and the second is moisture and precipitation. And you can see as we worked and stepped through the winter months and into the spring that our water year was behind, not only in terms of temperatures were above average and above normal, but also our water was less across much of the state. So lack of precipitation and warmer temperatures is how we set up into fire season 2026. And we'll go to the next slide. As we all know, living in Oregon, and I'm a born and raised Oregonian, this was a pretty dismal year in terms of the snowpack. And we all saw that and experienced that. A lot of people refer to it as a snow drought. We did not receive, because of that limited moisture and warmer temperatures, the normal amount of snow that we would receive in Oregon. And you can see that really play out across the crest of the Cascades and also in our eastern basins. And that has an effect on our drought and fuels, especially in the higher elevation fuel types and timber types. So as we look at limited moisture, we look at limited snowpack. Generally, that doesn't mean that it's going to be a bad fire season, but it could mean that we could have an elongated fire season and that conditions in higher elevations become readily available to burn earlier than they normally would with a more significant snowpack. So to the next slide. As you would imagine, that plays out. You can see the drought monitor early in September. You can see in 2025 where drought was across Oregon and also the western states. You can also see that as we moved into April of 2026, that drought expanded across much of Oregon. So southeast part of the state in 2025 was not in drought. And then you can see as we moved into 2026 in April that a significant portion, if not all, of Oregon was in some level of drought. As we look forward into the summer months, we anticipate that to continue to intensify and only get worse, which folks would assume based on the limited amount of precipitation that we've had across the state. Drought has a significant impact as we think about severity of fire season, because that has to do with the amount of moisture that's not only in the dead fuels, but also the live fuels. And so that has and can play out to cause some significant issues as we think about fire season. And we continue to watch this and monitor this. And I feel like will be a significant driver as we think about the 2026 fire season. Next slide. We all track where we're at with global climate. And so as you think about the global climate, the two significant factors are El Nino and La Nina. As I mentioned earlier, La Nina means cooler, wetter. Generally, during the winter months, we get more snow and cooler temperatures. What we're experiencing and what we're seeing is a pretty significant shift from a La Nina this last year into a pretty significant El Nino. Some folks have even called it super El Nino. So El Nino means a warmer, less moisture conditions that set up for the Pacific Northwest. And so that affects pretty much the whole West Coast. And so what you'll see is that as we move into the summer months, especially the latter part of the summer months, that we could have warmer and drier conditions. And again, as you think about where we're at with fuels, you think about where we're at with drought, less moisture, warmer conditions, you add that all up into a recipe, and that recipe doesn't look very good for fire season 2026. And we're already experiencing some of those conditions. Next slide. As we look forward into June, July, and August, so as we close out this month, look to the next month and then also August, the Climate Prediction Center is predicting above average temperatures, which tracks with the swing to El Nino, and then also below average precipitation, which means that fuels will continue to dry and be readily available to burn. I would note you'll see at the very bottom across the four corners in the Gulf there some above average precipitation. What that can mean for Oregon and something that we're closely watching, that monsoonal moisture that pushes up through the four corners and the southern part of the country can mean lightning for the state of Oregon. And so with that moisture pushing up from the south, it tends to wrap around Oregon and bring that moisture into the upper atmosphere. That upper atmosphere then produces thunderstorms. And so we're watching with these above average temperatures and below average precipitation for the Northwest, watching that moisture bubble down in the Southwest in the four corners. And what does that mean for lightning? As the Congresswoman mentioned, around 70% of fires are caused by humans. The other 30% is from natural causes and lightning. And so we're really tracking that 30% and what that means along with the human caused fires and the impacts on our fire season in 2026. Next slide. Did it? So as we look at the Climate Prediction Center drought outlook, as I mentioned, you roll all those pieces together and you see that significant drought exists in Oregon, not only in terms of its expansion across the state, but also persistent drought that stretches from Northeast Oregon all the way to the coast. And then also drought likely to develop across the rest of the state. And so as we think about this and our impact of fuels with new starts, both from humans and also from natural causes, that causes concern for fire managers as we think about our fuel conditions and our ability to respond based on those conditions. Next slide. We've done a lot of work around trying to compare fire seasons. And so as we look at weather and we look at conditions across the state, we try and compare those to previous years. And two of the analog years that are similar to the 2026 conditions are 2015. And you can see a couple significant fires there, predominantly on the east side of the state, along with Southern Oregon. And I would highlight the Canyon Creek fire in 2015. That was the first time in recent history in Oregon before 2020 that we had significant structure loss. And that was a fire that started outside of John Day and ran down the Canyon Creek drainage. Over 40 homes were lost. And kind of a real marker in terms of Oregon's history and impact from wildfire to communities. And so that's concerning. And then if you look at 2018, you'll see a significant number of fires in Southern Oregon. And those fires were on the landscape, significant acreage, significant cost, and significant smoke impacts to Southern Oregon as I think about the 2020 or the 2018 fire season. And so as we look at those and think about those, concerns exist for Southern Oregon based on conditions, obviously, and Eastern Oregon, if we look at the analog years of 2015 and 2018 to our current conditions in 2026. Next slide. So if you take all that and you bundle it all up, the prediction services provides significant fire potential outlooks, and you can see those. The slide on the left highlights June, and so you'll see significant wildfire potential exists over much of the eastern part of the state, and we've already experienced that. Over the last couple of weeks, there's been a handful of fires at over 1,000 acres. This weekend was pretty active in eastern and southeast Oregon. And so that tracks very closely with the current conditions and the responses across the U.S. Wildland Fire Service, our rangeland fire protection partners, our structural fire service, and what they're responding to. You roll the clock forward, you look to July, you'll see Southwest Oregon then comes into play in terms of significant fire potential. And I would also note that as you roll into July, you see much of the Western United States at significant risk. And the challenge here is that we all share resources. So Oregon is very fortunate in that we have our own incident management teams and through the Oregon Department of Forestry, aviation assets. However, our federal partners share their assets across all of the country. And when the Western United States gets busy, Northern California, Utah's busy right now, you see a drawdown of resources. And so as fire managers and professionals in this business, when we see the whole Western United States come online, we have concerns around how many large air tankers are out there, how do we share them, how do we prioritize them, how do we move those to the right incidents. And so that's something that we're thinking about and paying attention to as we step into July. Next slide. Move even further, you roll into August and September, and you see all of Oregon and Washington are at significant risk, both in the month of August and in September. And I would say this really speaks to the shift from La Nina to El Nino. We know that with that shift, those warmer, drier conditions, that we're likely to have an elongated fire season. And should we get fires in the higher elevations based on that low snowpack, there could be smoke impacts based on the long duration potential for fire season that could travel through September or even into October. Next slide. So a couple closing thoughts and things I wanted to leave with. Early start, we've seen that. Handful of significant fires across the landscape already, mostly in central and eastern Oregon. The season could be very long and challenging based on the fuel conditions and the amount of moisture. I want folks to know that we're prepared, both the Department of Forestry and the Department of State Fire Marshal. We have prepared all spring, all winter, and even up through just the other day, we're doing preparedness drills. We're ready to go. Our business is to help protect you and your communities. And so we're prepared and we're ready to go. We do have capacity concerns. Again, I mentioned that other parts of the country, especially the Western United States, come online. Shared resources could be limited. Again, we're fortunate in Oregon based on the resources that we have, but we'll continue to monitor that. And then I would close with, from the Department of State Fire Marshal, our agency, we are super thankful and blessed to have resources from the legislature around immediate response and our ability to mobilize structural fire resources at a moment's notice to help protect any community. The state legislature invested in an engine program that put 76 apparatus out in fire departments across the state. And then our staffing grant, which allowed 180 fire agencies out of the 300 in Oregon to add capacity to respond to your needs when you have an issue. And that's much bigger than just wildfire. That could be EMS. That could be anything that you need as a local homeowner or a constituent that has a problem or has an issue. We've been able to add some funding into those local fire agencies to help support you. Next slide. A couple things, as a congresswoman mentioned, that I would encourage all Oregonians to take a look at. You can scan this QR code. This is before you burn app, but if you scan this QR code, you can get all your local fire restrictions. And as a congresswoman mentioned, and she did it so eloquently at the very beginning, 70% of fires are caused by humans. And so if we can do a couple minor things, we can limit the number of fires on the landscape. And then when we do have those broad scale lightning events, we have the capacity and resources to manage that. So my ask to Oregonians is please help us help you, and please help limit any wildfires. And this will give you all the local restrictions within your area, and would encourage all Oregonians to scan this and take a look so you know what the conditions are, and you know what restrictions are out there, especially as we enter into the 4th of July weekend here shortly. Next slide. Lastly, my plug to all Oregonians is that please help our firefighters. Our firefighters will respond 24/7, 7 days a week. And there are some really simple things that we can do as homeowners, people that live in the wildland urban interface, to help our firefighters when they respond to protect your property. There's a QR code there. Strongly encourage Oregonians to go take a look, defensiblespace.org. Click that QR code and really focus on the first 5 feet around your house and then continue to work out. If you can do simple things like clean your gutters, clear off stuff underneath your decks, remove firewood stacks, trim trees and plants that are right next to your house. If a wildfire is moving towards your house and your firefighters are showing up to protect that house, some really simple things that you can do can not only help those firefighters be more efficient and effective, but it also can provide a safe place that they can make a stand and that they can protect your house. So I always ask all Oregonians to help out and to help our firefighters when they're running to the danger to protect your house. Lastly, I would just close with please pay attention to all your local warnings and evac levels. Have a go bag, as the Congresswoman mentioned. Know your evacuation levels. I feel like in Oregon, we're often in level 1, which is let's be prepared during the summer months. So please make sure you're prepared and that you're ready to go. And then please pay attention to those warnings, watches, and notifications should you need to evacuate in case of a wildfire. I'd ask that as we enter into these summer months, please think about how you can prevent one wildfire from happening. And if you can do that, we can all collectively help mitigate what potentially is a challenging 2026 wildfire season. And with that, Congresswoman, thank you so much for inviting us. It's always a pleasure and an honor. Thank you, ma'am.
Well, and thank you. These things may seem simple, but as the chief said, if we are prepared, then it makes it a whole lot easier. We are the ones that can prevent wildfires from happening, but we have to know, like just recently, just outside of Roseburg last week, there was a fire. It came up really quickly. It was put down really quickly, but there was a level 1 evacuation put out. We have to be ready because the conditions are such that we're going to see they're dry and wildfires will happen. Now, the question I had when I first looked at this PowerPoint was, we're comparing 2015 and 2018, which were bad years because they were so dry. Why didn't 2020 get mentioned, which was the most devastating wildfire year? Well, that's because we had 100-year winds, right? We had these east winds that came in, and we can't predict those. We don't know that they're not going to be there, but generally they don't come every other year. I mean, we do have an east wind. The east winds will come in. There's no way to know, but we do not expect them to be at the level that we had in 2020. So 2020 was an outlier. So that is why the fire marshal's office looked at 2015 and 2018. So there's that. And with that, happy to take questions.
Terrific. And just for those of you who joined late, you're on a Facebook Live, YouTube Live event with Congresswoman Val Hoyle and Chief Travis Medema with the Oregon State Fire Marshal's Office. And we're doing a wildfire town hall event tonight. We'll be answering questions for you. But from the top, If you missed it from the beginning, at the top corner is a QR code. You can go to that QR code to access all the resources that you are seeing tonight, including the slides that Chief Medema just presented. Will be on the Congresswoman's website as well. I think one thing to mention before we go to our first question, oralert.gov is an important app or website for you to go to. That is where you can get information about active fires and what you can do to protect your home. And again, we'll repeat those tonight. Our first question came into us earlier today in anticipation of this event. It's a question related to state-based resources, maybe specifically Oregon Department of Forestry. If either of you could address this, that'd be appreciated. With the fire seasons lasting longer and longer, what is your plan, or what is the plan to retrain and recruit seasonal wildland firefighters?
So this is a great question. And then for people who don't know, with wildland firefighters, we have many, many layers of how to staff this. So first of all, we have our professional structural firefighters that protect mostly our urban areas, but urban, suburban, and somewhat rural areas. Then we have our we have a lot of volunteer fire departments that step in when needed. We have, the Oregon State Fire Marshal, and Oregon is in the lead in how we help coordinate our local, state, private, tribal, and federal partners all together. And I will say a lot of this came out of 2020. Previous to 2020, we did a fine job, but we didn't coordinate as well as we should have. So I am a federal elected official. So my focus has been working to make sure that our wildland firefighters at the federal level actually got an increase in pay, and that increase in pay was permanent. We were set to lose 30 to 50% of our federal wildland firefighters, which would have been devastating. So we were able to include that funding in bills that move forward. So that's number one. Number two, the way that Oregon coordinates with all of our different resources, in fire season, we pull everyone together. The problem is there isn't fire season anymore. Fire season is all year long. And what used to be just a seasonal job where we would take people from a federal agency and have them work for 4 months fighting a fire, it's no longer 4 months. We are seeing fire all year long throughout our country and throughout the world. So I believe, and I'm working with both Democrats and Republicans, to actually have a comprehensive look at how do we actually make this a full-time job. For instance, our people who are the middle managers, the people who are incident commanders, the ones that come in and oversee which crew goes where, those people should be hired full-time, full year round. Now, Oregon does a better job at this than we do at the federal level, but we're working and talking about how do we do this. So what Oregon does is they work with our professional firefighters, structural firefighters, the federal wildland firefighters, their own wildland firefighters, people that we pull in from different agencies during the worst of the wildfire season, the firefighters that are the timber companies that they hire to protect their own lands, and our tribal communities together. Because if we each work individually, then we're not going to be able to address the issues. So my focus is, number one, making sure that the people that put their lives on the line to protect and serve our communities in really, really difficult work, being exposed to smoke, danger, carcinogens, poison oak, all the things, right, that they get paid what they're worth. Second of all, that we work with the contractors that provide our type 1 hotshot, type 2 initial attack, and type 2 hand crews, all the different groups that we need to supplement what we have permanently, that we keep them online and that we're paying them, because fundamentally it is harder to fight fires in the Pacific Northwest than it is to fight fires in Arizona, where the lands are flat, right? Where it's different. It is difficult to fight fires here. We have to pay more to have people fight fires in the Pacific Northwest the way we need it done. We can't be bringing people in from Texas or North Carolina because they're the lowest paid contractor, when they don't have people trained, they're not paying their workers. So we need to ensure that we're investing in paying people what they're worth. That has been one of my top priorities in Congress, and I'll continue to work on that. And again, there's local, state, federal, and then contractors, private contractors, tribal interests and timber companies. Everyone has their own people. But I will tell you that Oregon is at the top of the game in the entire nation of pulling people together to work together. Chief, would you like to comment on that?
Congresswoman, I think you summarized it well. I feel like I've been in the fire business 32 years, all in Oregon, and we find ourselves in a very fortunate place in that we have very excellent relationships with our federal partners. We coordinate daily at the regional level. We're also very fortunate because we have a large contracting base, and our private companies that help support our Department of Forestry and their firefighters, along with aircraft, all positions us very well to be in a place to effectively fight fire in the state of Oregon.
Right.
Terrific. Go ahead, Congresswoman.
Well, my point person in the legislature, I have a few people, Representative Paul Evans, who, chairs the Committee on Emergency Response, and then Representative Dacia Graber from Tualatin, who is a professional firefighter, who did wildland firefighting, who does this and focuses on this issue as a passion. And there is not a more qualified person in the legislature to lead this fight. And she has taken this on to lead this fight. And we work with her on a regular basis.
Terrific. I want to also add one thing for the viewers on tonight. oralert.gov is also a resource for Oregonians to use to receive emergency notifications. So it's a very good resource. Again, I'll repeat some later on for you tonight. But our first question speaks to the personal nature of what's going on in Oregon with wildland firefighting. For the both of you, for people who are worried about wildfire risk but don't have a huge budget, what are the first few things you'd recommend doing around the home?
Chief, I'm going to hand this one over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Carmen. And to the Oregonian who asked that question, I'd go back to that second to the last slide I had. There's some really simple things you can do right around your home. Clearing and cleaning of your gutters, so embers don't land in there. If there's dry pine needles in there, that can be very problematic. Cleaning up that 0 to 5 feet around your structure. That's where embers land as a wildfire potentially impacts your structure, and that 0 to 5 feet is really critical. And so trimming bushes, trimming hedges, anything that you can do in that 0 to 5 feet, putting rock, landscaping instead of bark dust right up against your structure, simple things like that can make a huge difference. Your deck also connects to your structure. And so anything you can do around your deck, whether that's fencing off or compartmentalizing it, if embers can get in underneath your deck, furniture on your deck can cause fires. And so embers can land in there. So removing those for wildfires coming. Fencing attached to your structure is another element. So if there's a way to use metal or another material that connects your wood fence to your house is another great example. But very simply, low cost, low budget, clean up around your house, 0 to 5 feet, clean your gutters, really simple things that you can do that can help protect your structure and then your home. And then it also helps our firefighters too. When we get in these large scale conflagrations, I think of the flat fire last year outside of Sisters, where our task forces are bumping from house to house to house to protect that as the fire front's moving towards those structures. The more work you've done allows firefighters to get in there really quick, to knock the fire down. That is a significant benefit. And then lastly, just a little bit of defensible space. If you can limb some trees in and around on your property and work out, to 50 feet, even to 100 feet, that all helps in terms of 1, embers in the 0 to 5, and then 2, the fire intensity as it gets close to your house.
And you're muted, Congresswoman.
What I'll say is in our yard, we like where we live, we have Doug fir and incense cedar. But as things are drier, we're seeing a number of our trees die. So those will go up like matchsticks with just one spark. So we've had to take down some of our trees that are absolutely dead, understanding that the climate is just different. So we can get as much water as we want, but some of our trees have died, and certainly in and around our defensible space in our home, where we used to have these trees that really thrived before, climate change created this excessive drought. We just don't have that same climate anymore. So we've had to make some really, really difficult choices, but better than having to lose our home.
Moving on to our next question, one person wrote in that I heard about cuts at the Forest Service and other agencies. How do you expect that to affect our ability to respond to wildfires, and how can we prevent that from happening?
So it's more than cuts. They've actually restructured the Forest Service and, our regional ability to respond. Like, they've moved everything to Utah. They're taking away a lot of our regional staff. We were very lucky in that we were able to keep a number of people who are at OHSU, who are in our region. I'm glad they recognize the value of that. I work on this every single day. We have seen throughout the federal government really integral, key, talented professionals being thrown out or put into jobs that they're more than, that they're not qualified for, right? Answering phones when they're an expert. And this is about breaking government. I am incredibly concerned about it. When we've talked to our Forest Service, they have said that they are fully staffed for what they need for wildfire season. Now, are they afraid to speak up because this is an administration that has told them that if they speak out? I literally am working with one federal wildland firefighter who, on his own time, spoke out about not having the resources he needs, and they have been trying for 1.5 years to fire him. So, we're trying to dig in. The good thing is wildfire is not a Democratic issue, right? Like, wildfire does not stop in blue or red states. So we've been able to build a really good coalition of Democrats and Republicans who are very, very clear about needing to have the resources to fight fire. I will say again and give credit to the state of Oregon and the way that they take the lead in pulling together all the resources. We are looked at as a model in the country of how to pull in resources. We also have to know that we have an administration that has clearly said they're not going to send funding to blue states. We have not seen that impact wildland firefighting at this point. I'm a little concerned about if we have massive fires, what's going to happen afterwards. But quite frankly, it's a hell of a lot better than I thought it would be.
Well, I don't know how well you all know your drought history. We do have a question about drought, and is this year expected to be worse than the 1976-77 drought? Chief Medema, you might be the one to answer this one.
Whew. I'd have to phone a friend and look back at the records to know that. I don't know that I wasn't there for that. So,
well, we appreciate the question, and I think you've cleared all of us. We will definitely need to be looking into that.
We're not sure, but what I can say about droughts in the past versus now, you know, we've lived in Oregon for, you know, we moved here 26 years ago to raise our children, to, you know, to bring up our family. And when we came here, it rained a hell of a lot more. It rained a lot more. We would see slugs everywhere. The climate was different. And so there may have been a 77 drought that was severe. The difference was that you had either end of that drought where we had plenty of water, which made, you know, west of the Cascades, a wet forest. We're not seeing that. What we're seeing is drought after severe drought, and maybe a little less severe drought, and then another drought. And so this is becoming more frequent, and it's harder for our trees and our ecosystem to respond when there is so much dry weather for so long. This is becoming permanent. I talked to some fire chiefs, I think it was last year, and they said, you are where LA was, you know, 15 years ago. So, you know, our climate has changed. And again, 77 in a picture in time may have been the same, but the either sides of it were very, very different.
yeah, Carmen, and I would add, you know, from a drought perspective, in 2012 is where we really recognize the significance, at least in, you know, modern times, the significance of drought. In 2012, brought some pretty significant fire conditions to the east side of the state, the Holloway fire, long draw, and that was all climatically driven drought that led to those fires. You roll forward to the Congresswoman's point, you roll forward into 2013, that was a very significant fire season. The first time the state of Oregon had spent over $100 million in 2013. And then it just continues to build, right? You roll into 15, you roll into 18, 2020, 2024, we burned almost 1.9 million acres in 2024. Significant impact from wildfire. So we have definitely seen a significant shift in fire severity, fire intensity, and the impact of wildfires, at least in my 30-year career in the state of Oregon.
Terrific. We have some back and forth in the chat regarding what cities can do that aren't necessarily in the WUI, although there are WUI questions I hope we can get to. But what can neighborhoods do to be better prepared? And how do you work with cities that might be thinly budgeted to be able to, you know, better deal with the risk of wildfire? And adding in that, how do you deal with overgrown properties when you're working with cities during fire season?
Chief?
Yeah, great question. We have, and I mentioned that, defensiblespace.org. So communities can, and those are free assessments. So folks can reach out and you can coordinate that across your community and getting a defensible space assessment. So that would be the first stop. We also, if you go to our website, Oregon State Fire Marshal, you can find our regional mobilization coordinators and also our fire risk reduction specialists. And we're very fortunate in this state to have 9 different regions that are represented by fire risk reduction specialists. And those are the technical experts that can help communities, that can help property owners and help homeowners with community planning. They can help with defensible space, fire prevention, And so my messaging to Oregonians would be reach out to our website at the community level or at the city level, connect with our fire risk reduction specialists. They're a technical resource for our communities and cities that can help them plan and can help mitigate wildfire risk.
And Chief, how do people get that information? Is it this QR code or?
We'll post it. Yep. They can go to the defensiblespace.org and or we'll follow up and I'll make sure that we have a QR code to our website and can connect with our fire for cities and counties that can connect with our fire risk reduction specialists.
The other thing I will say is before 2020, if you were living in an urban area, you kind of felt like you were safe from wildfires. You know, in 2020, you know, where the winds were so strong and that fire was jumping ridges, we were very, very close to Springfield being on fire, to Salem being on fire, you know, to, not too far back, Corvallis being on fire when St. Mary's Peak, we had a fire up there. Ashland, right? We looked at it, so many urban areas. Just because you're in an urban area doesn't mean that you are safe. And so we all have to have these protections, but every urban area has CERTs, community emergency response teams. And I know, I know Eugene has a really, really strong one. And I think people think, well, maybe there'll be an earthquake, maybe there'll be something. The community emergency response teams are there to help people prepare in case of an emergency. Like we have extra water, we have extra food, we have our to-go bag. I mean, this is just something we do as a matter of course, knowing that we live in an earthquake zone and in an area where there are wildfires. It's just what you do. And that ounce of preparation makes a difference. Plus every single one of us, again, the chief said 70% of fires, 75% of fires. I mean, the data is between 75 and 85% of fires are human caused. And so every single one of us needs to take responsibility for making sure that we're not doing something to contribute to the problem, but community emergency response teams, find the one in your area, and then we'll give you a way to get defensiblespace.org and also a way to get to the website of the Oregon State Fire Marshal.
If you've just joined us, a place to get those resources at any time, use the QR code at the top right corner of this website. It'll take you to our website, but on that website will be the chief's remarks, which is also embedded with a rich amount of resources. I'm going to combine a couple questions here just to be efficient with our time to help folks get their questions answered. There's a real concern about how residents are notified during an emergency. And so what is the expectation if you're living in a rural community or urban community? How do you get notified if there's a fire? But in addition to that, one person says, look, if we decide not to evacuate, should we be in the path of the fire, or we hunkered down in our vehicles in the middle of a 7-acre pasture, would we survive the fire that would maybe be 100 feet around us? So notification and what to do, go, no go.
Chief, punting that one to you.
Yeah, Carmen, thanks. You mentioned sign up for OR alerts, right? And so that's number one for sure. That's where messaging comes through. You also get it over your cell phones through app. So number one is make sure you sign up for that. You get evacuation information through that. So that's critical. You can go to the Department of Emergency Management too. They maintain that and can help with some of that messaging along with your local emergency managers. So that's key number one in terms of evacuations. Two is, should you evacuate or should you not evacuate? I always lean towards trusting the professionals. So you have local sheriffs that have the responsibility for evacuations. That's done in concert with the fire managers on the ground, making those decisions. Those are the folks that have the intel in their hand at that moment, making those decisions. And I would strongly always encourage Oregonians to follow the recommendations around the different evacuation levels. So instead of staying in place, if you can get out and you have a safe route, I would strongly recommend following whatever is recommended by your local emergency manager or your sheriff's department in terms of evacuations.
And what I can say is, and as we saw over near Roseburg just this last week, is fires can come up very quickly, and they can move very quickly. So when there is an alert for an evacuation, people should take it seriously. You could chance it, but here's the thing: when you chance it, and I talked to the fire chief when we had the 2020 fires, everyone in our area got the level 3 evacuation, and we left. And I said, but the fires weren't that close. And he explained, just with the wind and the fires jumping ridges, it could have easily gotten to us. But he said, your road is a critical path for emergency vehicles between where the fire was and where we needed to get equipment. So if you stayed too long and you weren't able to get out, or your car broke down on that road, it could impede our ability to help other people. More importantly, if somebody stays in a dangerous situation and we have to send emergency vehicles to pull you out, that is putting emergency first responders' lives on the line, and it is taking them away from actually fighting the fire that they need to fight. So fundamentally, leaving it's hard. And I know that for our first evacuation, I walked around my house for hours not knowing what to get. And when I left, I was like, why didn't I bring this? Why didn't I bring that? That is why planning is so critical. But I hear what you're saying. And if you've got, that 100 feet, but you just don't know. And if somebody has to come in and pull you out of that situation, you're putting everyone's lives at risk.
The next question is a bit around Oregon law and liability. So I'll walk you through this. Oregon law allows landowners to be held liable if their actions or negligence contribute to wildfire damage, but this is reactive rather than proactive. So really, from your all's vantage point in your seats, is there a strategy to address private unmanaged lands? I think really is the point, and a concern that, what does this mean for other people if people's lands go unmanaged, and what is the risk?
So I think we all have to take responsibility for preventing wildfire, because it doesn't stop at your property line. We had a fire down in Southern Oregon 4 years ago that started, and they weren't able to put it out early, and it burned for 4.5 months. 4.5 months. And we lost a lot of acreage. We lost a lot of trees. We put people's lives in danger. So fundamentally, people need to take personal responsibility for keeping our communities safe, because we all take responsibility for keeping your home safe. Now, this is a state issue, and I am a federal elected official, so I can't weigh in on that. What I can say is, living in a rural community, and I live mostly in an area where people are conservative, and some people are Republicans, some people are Democrats, but every single one of us take our responsibilities as part of our community, as neighbors, very, very seriously. It is my responsibility to keep my property so that we can prevent wildfire as much as it is my neighbors. And I think we all have to take that personal responsibility to keep all of us safe.
So the next question is, why do we still allow open burning with what we know about the risks of the risk of causing a wildfire, negative health effects of smoke, and the effects of burning on the climate?
Chief, gonna put that one over to you.
Yeah, as we think about prescribed fire and open burning, we recognize that our forests and our landscapes have had fire that has been excluded for many, many decades. And one tool to help manage our risk, especially in and around communities, is using prescribed fire and or thinning and burning of piles to reduce the vegetation loads. And so as we think about that, and as we recognize that our fuel loadings are significantly up, that our conditions in Oregon have continued with the drought that we just showed, continued to worsen, our fire risk has increased. And so we have to manage that. We cannot suppress, i.e., respond to every single wildfire and keep every single wildfire small in Oregon because of those conditions. And so we need to do mitigation work. And that mitigation work, again, one of those key tools is to use prescribed fire. Pile burning is one of those. And there's a balance and a smoke management program in Oregon that balances the risk of impacts from wildfire smoke to communities. There's dedicated forecasters that do modeling when there are prescribed fires and when there is pile burning that help minimize those smoke impacts to communities. That said, I, living in Central Oregon, have lived through day after day after day of wildfire smoke that is way worse than any prescribed fire smoke. And so the balance of, significant wildfires on the landscape, the impact of the wildfire smoke during the summer months versus a controlled, mitigated, planned event on prescribed fire to reduce those risks is the balance. And so that's really, Carmen, I think the key to that discussion.
So 115 years ago, when we took the land from, from our tribal nations, where they used indigenous practices of forest management, where they used fire to keep forests healthy, and we started fire suppression. So this has been 115 years. Our climate has changed. There is more to burn. We started clear cutting. We started, monoculture of trees. There are so many things that if we just look in this 115-year period that have made our forests less healthy. But 3 years ago, when we had the fires in Canada, it was 2 or 3 years ago here, and everyone was complaining because they had smoke and they couldn't breathe, I took it as an opportunity to say, this is what we have every summer. So if we use prescribed fires at a time when it's not now, when it's not this dry, to make sure that we can have healthier forests, because that's how we used to manage our forests. The fires that we have now, some people have said, why don't you just let it burn because that's natural? These fires aren't natural. They are burning hotter. They are larger. They are baking our ground. They are making it so that we can't get access to our groundwater. The fact of the matter is, forest practices over the past 115 years and climate change have led us to the place that we have to do something. So if we look at the smoke that we've had, and the chief said it so well, during wildfire season, when you can't see and you can't breathe, that isn't healthy, right? That's not good for the environment. We have to get to a place where we are managing our forests. And again, this is why I'm working so hard on tribal co-management of our forest lands, so that we can go back to making sure that we're managing our forests in a way that keeps them, that keeps it healthy and addresses wildfire not just as an emergency, but uses fire as a tool along with all the other tools that we have. But fundamentally, would I prefer what we had in 2020 to using prescribed fires and some localized burns during the season when it's more wet? Yeah, I'd prefer that to the giant fires where we can't see, we can't breathe, we put people's lives in danger.
There are a few questions around the WUI, the wildland urban interface, concerns around why are we continuing to build in the wildland in the WUI area, and in addition to that, are there support for cities to do evacuation planning, especially for areas in urban wildland interfaces and mosaics with limited entry and access roads? So again, that concern that why do we continue to allow building, and with the structures and people that are there, are there planning resources to help plan to get people out or be better prepared for wildfire?
Chief, this one's all you.
Thanks, Congresswoman. So a couple thoughts. One is, working with local building officials on water supply and also access and egress as communities build out developments, I think is really important and part of the Oregon Fire Code. So there's some elements of that in that question. So number one, that's an element that occurs. I think community members that, do build in the wildland urban interface. Again, I would go back to there's some really simple things as you're building out in the wildland urban interface that you can do around home hardening and defensible space. And so as these communities build out at the local level, there's local planning and local efforts by building officials to enact codes at the local level. And so it really depends on which city, which community you're in. I don't know where they're at, but there are local adoption codes. There's a code called R327. And that's a local code that cities can adopt around a building in the wildland urban interface.
Good answer.
I hate to say this, but we are now out of time for this evening's events. There are several questions in the queue that we were unable to get to. I know the team here has been tracking those, but I strongly encourage people to reach directly out to the Congresswoman's office. We'd like to make sure to respond to those and really make sure people get access to the resources that are available to you. Use, again, the QR code, recommendations, prepare a go bag, prepare food, prepare water, have a plan where you go ahead of time. And I did like in the comment, goats are a great strategy to help clear out brush.
Yeah,
couldn't agree more. There's the Before You Burn resource, OregonDefensibleSpace.org, and again, oralert.gov. When we had the state fire marshal on last time, she said if we all did nothing else, we should download that app and it will give us emergency notifications. I want to hand the floor over for closing comments to you, Congresswoman.
So the OR Alerts app is, I have it. I listen to it. We, make sure that we get those alerts out on social media, on all of our social media. I also have the Watch Duty app. And Watch Duty will tell you where fires are in any of the regions that they cover, how much of the fire is under control, where it is. It gives you a ton of information, and it is probably the app that I use most on following weather and fire. So you have OR Alerts, which is for Oregon, and then Watch Duty is what I personally use. And again, the biggest thing that we can do is be careful and be really cognizant that one small spark can ignite a massive wildfire, especially coming into July 4th as we celebrate the 250th anniversary of this great country. And Chief, would you like any closing remarks?
Congresswoman, thanks again for having me, and would just encourage all Oregonians as we step into what appears to be a very challenging 2026 wildfire season. Please help us help you. So anything you can do to prevent wildfires, anything you can do around your home that helps our firefighters when they show up to protect what's important to you. Huge thanks. So be safe, be careful. And please have a safe 2026 wildfire season.
All right. And thanks for all you do, Chief.
Thank you both. And this concludes this evening's town hall. Have a good evening.